Hello, time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us are Mark Ogden, senior writer for ESPN, and Sam Dean, football reporter for the Daily Telegraph. Welcome to you both. Let's run you through the back pages before we chat. Let's start here. To dare is to door is the splash in The Sun, which is reporting that Mauricio Pochettino is being lined up as the permanent replacement for Thomas Frank in the summer. Back of the Mirror says mock Tudor. Spurs fans left unimpressed as Igor agrees to be interim boss, they say. And on the side panel there, you'll see Ratcliffe in apology to Glazers. Similar headline in the Express as well, mock Tudor. And again, that story about Sir Jim Ratcliffe after his controversial comments about immigration in the UK. Daily Telegraph, their front page, dominated by the rugby. Will they be dancing on the streets of Edinburgh? England tap into Gen Z spirit for Calcutta Cup clash at Murrayfield. And the Guardian pictures a victorious Matt Weston after his gold in the skeleton. The headline, Weston is Team GB's Superman. And below that, more on Igor Tudor taking over at Tottenham Hotspur. And finally, in the Star, they go with mock Tudor and hoodoo buster Maro Itoje. OK, let's start with Spurs. Some left field news, perhaps you could say. I wonder if the fans were shocked about this appointment, Mark. In comes Igor Tudor. He's untested in the Premier League as both a coach and a player. Do you feel like he's the man to get Spurs out of trouble?
Well, my instant reaction is that it's a massive gamble. I think when Thomas Frank was sacked a couple of days ago, I think that the general sense around Tottenham and most of the fans was one of relief and almost finally he's gone, and then they can kind of bring enough feel-good factor back. But that has just gone completely today because, you know, Igor Tudor has a reputation as a coach that's worked throughout Europe. He's not a nobody, but he's certainly a coach that people in England aren't familiar with. And I think the fans won't know who he is. The fans will be very disappointed that they've got a coach whose recent jobs in Italy have been unimpressive. And I think, you had an Italian expert on before comparing him to Ivan Juric, who was at Southampton last season. Now, his record was 2 wins in 16. Now, Igor Tudor's got 12 games at Tottenham, and if he has a similar record to Ivan Juric at Southampton, Spurs could be relegated. So it's a very bold appointment by Tottenham. It's a massive risk. And I think we've seen, in recent years, Vitor Pereira went in at Wolves a couple of years ago. First job in the Premier League, did a fantastic job, kept them up. But generally, coaches that are basically thrown at the deep end at a Premier League club struggle. Ruben Amorim had a terrible time at Man United, never got to grips with it. Juric, we've mentioned at Southampton. Ralph Rangnick at Man United when he came in. If you're not familiar with the Premier League as a player or a coach, it does take a bit of time to get used to it. And Tudor's got 12 games. And Spurs are in a relegation fight. And this is just it's a massive gamble by Tottenham. I can't quite understand why they've taken such a risk.
Yeah, and quite a few of the back pages have focused on this appointment. Back page of the Mirror, mock Tudor. We've got back page of the Sun. To dare is to Tudor. You've also got the back page of the Daily Express as well. They've gone with the headline, mock Tudor. Sam, for you, everyone's saying it's a gamble, it's a bit of a risk because he hasn't got that Premier League experience. So what does success look like for Spurs under Tudor at this point? Is it just as simple as keep them up?
I think so. I think, to be blunt, that is the only requirement for Tudor. And I take Mark's point completely on the element of this being a pretty big gamble. But what I would say is that I think from his managerial career, he has shown that he can come in and make a pretty quick impact at places. I mean, he's very much not a coach for the long term. And if you go through his career, he's had 12 managerial positions in 13 years and only lasted more than a year once in his whole career. I think he averages around 30 games per club. So he's not used to sticking around and being around for a long time. But his actual record, generally speaking, when coming into a club, mid-season as well, is quite good. I think, for example, he won 3 of his first 5 games at Juventus, 3 of his first 5 games at Lazio, and 5 of his first 6 games at Marseille, although the Marseille one was at the start of the season rather than midway through. So there are signs and there is evidence that he is a man capable of coming in and making an instant impact. And that's obviously what Spurs need. And it's clear that this appointment has been made with a view to looking at someone else in the summer with, I think, Mauricio Pochettino. We all know, I think, would be quite keen to come back to Spurs, and we know how popular a decision that would be with the Spurs fans. So that seems likely. If Tudor is just a stopgap, then that's not an unfamiliar position for him to be in. And he clearly hasn't come to Spurs and said, I need 6 months to adjust and to adapt. He's clearly promised instant results, and I think his CV shows that he can deliver that. But, as Mark says, and this is the crucial thing, he's got no Premier League experience at all. And yes, I think sometimes we all in England sort of ramp up the importance and the quality of the Premier League, but it is a massive factor, both for players and for coaches, that it is a different league. It's a higher standard league. Just look at the Champions League and the fact that there are so many English teams in the top 8 this season. The Premier League is simply on a different level to every other competition in Europe. And he's not seen it before as a player or a coach. And that could prove very challenging indeed.
And as it's pointed out in the Mirror, Mark, Tudor has failed to hold down any managerial position for as long as a year in the past dozen seasons. That's got to be a worry as well, hasn't it, for the Spurs hierarchy and the fans?
Well, it's definitely a worry for the fans because the hiring coach, though, I mean, if Igor Tudor had a great record in Italy or France or wherever he's worked and had won major trophies, then fine, but he hasn't even got that. He's not a guy that's got a stellar record somewhere else and he's bringing it to the Premier League, you know, like a Jose Mourinho or Pep Guardiola. He's a guy that just is a firefighter, and he's done that well in Italy and France. And, you know, I guess in Italy he's a familiar face. A lot of the players will know who he is. He's a guy that's he's played there, he's coached there. Now, I remember when Ralph Rangnick was given the job at Man United a few years ago, I was told that one of the senior players had to Google him because they didn't know who he was. I'm pretty sure that quite a lot of Tottenham players today are asking, who is this guy? And that may be a little bit disrespectful because, yes, he's got a CV that showed he's worked at some big clubs in Europe. But the Premier League, as Sam said, is the biggest, most powerful league in the world. And people that work or play in the Premier League don't really look at other leagues to see what people are doing because they're in the best league. And we've seen players go to, you know, Italy in recent years from the Premier League and do really well, but coming the other way, they haven't done so well. And I think it's just, seriously, I was struggling to think of a more left field appointment, and I automatically went to Liam Rossini, so it's not that long ago since a Premier League club went a bit left field. But this is, considering the situation Tottenham are in, when they had to keep it safe and keep it and make it as certain as possible they're going to stay up, they've just put everything on the 8 ball landing on red, and it might end up on black.
Let's just go back to the Sun, because they mentioned Mauricio Pochettino. He's been widely linked with the club and with the permanent position at Spurs. Of course, he hasn't come out and said anything. He's still head coach of the USA team going into a home World Cup this summer. But is that the likely answer now, Sam, do you think, that Tudor will keep them up or hopefully keep them up till the end of the season, and then the long-term investment, the long-term plan is to have someone like Mauricio Pochettino in place?
That does seem to be the case. And as I said before, I think the Spurs ownership will be very conscious of the popularity that Pochettino still has. I don't think his season at Chelsea has damaged him too much in the eyes of the Spurs fans. And I think from what we know and what we've reported and what we hear, I think he would be keen to come back to Spurs at one point in the future. Obviously, he has the World Cup, a home World Cup as the United States coach, and he'll want to excel at that. But I think beyond that, I think there's uncertainty over his future. And for me, it seems kind of clear that they've left the door open to Pochettino by hiring a short-term interim coach. What will be interesting is Tudor does really well. And that's obviously something we've seen with previous clubs. When an interim comes in and it excels, it then becomes quite hard to not give them the job on a permanent basis. So it will be curious to see if they go on a great run. And I think it's possible. I mean, Spurs clearly have been underperforming badly this season under Thomas Frank. And I don't think it would necessarily take too much to turn that around quite quickly. If he does that, what kind of questions does that ask of the ownership and Johan Langer and Vinay Venkatesham, the key decision makers at Spurs? And is it then becoming quite difficult to not pick Tudor for the long term? Would Tudor even want that? We don't know that for sure. And I'm sure that's the kind of question he'll be asked in his first few press conferences. But you would say right now that Pochettino coming in the summer feels very, very possible indeed. But I would also add that Roberto De Zerbi is available, a top coach who's proven himself in the Premier League and at big clubs. And also Andoni Iraola, for example, at Bournemouth. Will people be looking at him and trying to bring him in? Marco Silva too at Fulham. Those guys are Premier League proven. So I wouldn't say now, sit here and say oh, it's definitely Pochettino's in the summer. I think it's far from that, but he certainly will be a strong candidate and perhaps most importantly, a very popular candidate in North London.
Yeah, very popular. So many Spurs fans seem to want him to come back, Mark. Is that not odd, considering where Spurs are and where they want to be in terms of their ambitions? Do they not want a manager that has a proven track record of winning things?
Well, I guess in the eyes of Tottenham fans, Pochettino has a proven track record in making Spurs competitive, and not many coaches have done that at Tottenham over the last 20, 30 years. He really is the high point in terms of what he brought, and he didn't win anything, but he took them to a Champions League final, had them knocking on the door, and it's debatable as to whether he could have taken them further or whether he was held back in terms of the club bringing players in. So, you know, Pochettino, in the eyes of Tottenham fans, is their darling, isn't he? He's the guy that they all want back. They've got this real kind of glow about Pochettino, but he's gone away and he's had mixed success. It has to be said. He did okay at PSG, did okay at Chelsea, but not great. And you know, working for ESPN, I know that he's not very popular in the US in terms of how he's done so far. It's a very fractious kind of relationship with the US Federation and the supporters. So there's not a lot of people in the US that have been impressed by Pochettino. So I won't say he's damaged goods, but he's coming back to Tottenham. If he comes back to Tottenham as a guy with quite a bit to prove, so I guess it's a good kind of marriage between the two of them. He does come back, but there will be the clubs in for Pochettino as well. I mean, who knows? Man United might be a contender as well, because we keep seeing, you know, Thomas Tuchel signed a contract with England, Carlo Ancelotti's rumoured to be signing a contract with Brazil. All of a sudden, the big candidates are dropping out. So Pochettino might have other offers, and there might be better offers than Tottenham, especially Champions League clubs.
OK, something we will definitely keep an eye on here on Back Pages tonight. OK, thank you for the moment. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be looking at more of the sports stories in the morning's newspapers, including this in the Daily Telegraph. Will they be dancing on the streets of Edinburgh? We'll be looking ahead to England against Scotland at Murrayfield. To Back Pages tonight. Welcome back as well to Mark Ogden from ESPN and Sam Dean from The Telegraph. Let's get straight to the back page of The Guardian. Look at this splash picture, an incredible photo, such joy, such jubilation. Weston is Team GB's Superman. Captain Marvel strikes gold after record-breaking skeleton runs. That is a gold medal for Team GB, the first of the Winter Olympics, from Matt Weston. And Mark, he was so dominant. He was a favourite going in. And it's difficult, isn't it, when you've got that pressure on you? But he delivered, and delivered emphatically. Yeah,
well, he's a reigning world champion, but, you know, people who compete in the Olympics say that the Olympics is just a different level of stress and anticipation and glory when it comes to it. And I think the pressure that is on the best in the world to win it is probably more intense than we can imagine. And he did win it by some distance in the end. It was a fractional seconds, but quite a big distance in skeleton. But, I mean, just watching it, it does make you dizzy just watching it, because they're going down that track so fast, and it doesn't just take skill, it takes massive bravery and courage as well to do that. So, you know, it's a long overdue medal at this Olympics, but, you know, it's certainly one that's deserved. And I think, you know, when you have elite sports people at the very top of their game, you know, it might be a sport that not a lot of people compete in, but still to be the best in the world and an Olympic champion, you can't take that away from him. Although I do think that Sam was quite close to being on the same champion as... isn't that right, Sam?
You've teed that up wonderfully, Mark. I've seen poll after poll on the scariest sports at these Winter Olympics. And you know which sport always tops it? Skeleton. Would I ever try it? Not if you paid me. But Sam Dean, you have thrown yourself down an ice track on something akin to a baking tray. Were you paid? I hope you were paid. This is absolutely incredible from you.
Yeah, when I flagged this before coming on, I didn't actually think we'd be putting it on air, but here we are. Yeah, I tried this in. Also, you can see that was my best ever hairdo as well.
You look great.
This in 2018 at the University of Bath track, which I believe is still the only track in the UK where they can train this. So I'm sure Matt Weston spent many hours down there too. I'll admit that I didn't take to it as a real natural. The one thing I remember, I mean, it was quite a while ago, but I remember the first piece of advice was keep your head up and keep your neck up. And I sort of said, oh, why is that the most important thing? And the answer, it turns out, was if you don't, the natural sort of G-forces will just make your face scrape across the ice.
Oh, goodness me.
Which obviously is not what you want. And I think they actually handed me a helmet which had scratch marks on the face, which was quite alarming. But what I would say about Matt Weston is that clearly a lot of people won't know what that's like to do that sport and the physical demands that are required. And I don't know that either. I did it once as an amateur, but I was reading about him, and he's so well coordinated and balanced that he can juggle while riding a unicycle.
Wow.
And that, I think, paints a picture of the kind of athlete we're talking about, and his ability to, I think they basically change angles and speeds based on tiny tweaks of their knees and their shoulders and their hips. And that precise control of his own body, I think, is really extraordinary. And very few athletes at the top of their game will have that level of physical power and technique and control. So this guy is clearly a supreme athlete and deserves, I think, all the credit he's rightly getting on the back pages tonight.
Yeah, what a fantastic achievement. The Times also splashing with the picture of Matt Weston. Just look at his face. He's done something absolutely incredible. The first British man, by the way, to win an Olympic skeleton gold medal. OK, we're going to stick with the Times. You can see that headline there just on the bottom right-hand corner. Rodri facing ban for not neutral referee comment. Mark, I'll come to you on this one. Rodri facing a ban after being charged by the FA over comments he made about the officials in the aftermath of Manchester City's draw with Tottenham this month. Now, we often see players in the heat of the moment talk honestly, talk openly, but I suppose when it encroaches into the area of referee bias, there's only ever going to be one outcome, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's taken quite a while to come to this, but I think that the key quote is when Rodri says that the referee has to be neutral. So by saying that the referee has to be neutral is implying that he's not neutral, which then implies that he's biased. And, you know, you can't go down that road. I mean, referees, no matter where they're from, we always talk about English referees are the best in the world, but I just think referees in general are, you know, doing a very difficult job, and they're honest. And I think for Rodri to say that, and yes, it was the heat of the moment, but ultimately, you know, Rodri's a very high-profile player, Ballon d'Or winner, plays for one of the best teams in the world. And if he's suggesting that referees have to be neutral and implying that they're not, then the FA have to take action. And I don't quite know what sort of sanction the FA have at their disposal. I think it's quite vague whether it's a fine or a ban. But if it is a ban, then I think you have to kind of go down that road of the player that implies a referee isn't being impartial, because the ref's got a tough enough job as it is without star players suggesting that they're not doing it in a balanced way.
And this isn't ideal for Manchester City if it does end up being a ban for Rodri, Sam, because we're at the running stage, a really crucial stage of the Premier League season.
Yeah, of course, and we all know how important Rodri is and how important his absence has been to City when he was injured long term, obviously, and the kind of damaging effect that has without Rodri. So losing him for any length of time would, of course, be a problem. I just wonder on this issue, because obviously it came very similar timing to when Pep Guardiola complained after the Wolves game about not getting a penalty, and sort of spoke widely about his feeling that City don't get the decisions they should be getting. I just wonder if it's a little window into their own psyche behind closed doors and in the dressing room, and the fact that they clearly feel like the world's against them, and whether they're perhaps using that. I think it's a classic tried and tested method of motivating yourselves for a run-in. It's the us against the world siege mentality thing, and I just wonder if those Guardiola comments and the Rodri comments too speak to that vibe in the dressing room and the way they're trying to pit themselves against the rest of the world and use that as a fuel. But certainly certainly agree with Mark that he's, I think in my eyes anyway, he's strayed way over the line with these comments. And you can criticise the referee, but you can't accuse him of bias. And that, as Mark says, they've already got a hard enough job, and it doesn't help at all to do that. So I think he might be in trouble here.
OK, I want to stay with football. Head back to the back page of the Mirror. The headline on the right-hand column there, Ratcliffe in apology to Glazers. An exclusive here by Jeremy Cross. So Jim Ratcliffe has apologised to the Glazers for his controversial comments about immigration, which brought shame on Manchester United. Mark, I suppose the controversy that was stirred up as a result of this and the backlash that was faced after Ratcliffe made those comments, you can understand why the co-owners of Manchester United might be a little bit aggrieved by what Sir Jim said.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess this goes down to reputational damage, and the reputational damage on Man United by association, because one of their co-owners has said such, inflammatory things. And, the Glazers, they are the majority shareholders of Man United. Now, I don't think many Man United supporters will have much sympathy for the Glazers if their asset is diminished by Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments, because the Glazers are probably more unpopular than Jim Ratcliffe, believe it or not. So, what he said was potentially damaging, though, because it could affect sponsors, it could affect partners, it could affect money coming in. There could be all sorts of issues, implications for Man United. It could, affect their fan base. As you know, Man United are a huge global club with fans all over the world. Who knows what many of their supporters who may have relatives in this country, people who've emigrated to this country, what they think. So across the board, there are many ways this could damage Man United. So if Sir Jim Ratcliffe has had to apologise to the Glazers, it's because of how damaging this could be. But as I say, the Glazers have probably done enough over the years to damage Man United themselves. So it's a mute apology, but I think it's one that, they're quite right to expect.
Yeah, a mute apology. Some might have described that as the way that Sir Jim apologised in public. What kind of apology would you be expecting for Sir Jim when he's talking to the Glazers, Sam?
Yeah, well, it's a tricky one, this, and it speaks a bit to the dynamic that Jim Ratcliffe is kind of navigating himself, I suppose. And there was a good piece by my colleague Sam Wallace in Telegraph today speaking about how Ratcliffe is effectively trying to work out, I suppose, he's got two hats on at all times now. I mean, on one hand, he's the Ineos entrepreneur who's sort of raging against regulation in the petrochemicals business and fighting against sort of the threats of Chinese competition and energy costs. And on the other hand, he's the face now of the most global, well-followed football club in the world. And those two things don't always match up, and that's a fine balance for anyone to tread. And I think it's fair to say that Jim Ratcliffe failed to tread that with any sort of sensitivity at all this weekend. I mean, look, a lot of it comes down to personal opinion, of course, and I'm sure there are plenty of viewers who feel differently about these things to me. But for me, the use of the word colonised, I think, was incredibly poor and divisive, and rightly triggered the sort of backlash that we've seen. But I think it just speaks to the challenge that Ratcliffe is facing as a public figure, as an extremely wealthy man, that he is the face of Man United too now. He's not just the face of Ineos with business interests. He is the face of a club that wants to be inclusive and open to all, and wants to be stretching out their arms and saying, come support us, come to Old Trafford, come buy our merchandise. And those two things don't always go hand in hand, and I think this will be a lesson on that for Sir Jim Ratcliffe.
OK, we're almost coming to time, but let's just take a look at the back page of the Daily Telegraph. They've splashed on the rugby. Will they be dancing on the streets of Edinburgh? England tap into Gen Z spirit for Calcutta Cup clash. Scotland taking on England at Murrayfield. And Mark, Scotland head coach Gregor Townsend under a bit of pressure after that loss to Italy. How's this one going to go?
Yeah, well, he's probably been helped by those comments by Courtney Law suggesting that